And spiritual abuse affects people's relationships. It affects people's psychological state. It affects people's emotional state. It affects people's finances oftentimes. It affects their career. We're not talking about church hurt.
Because you have that feeling, you know something's not right, but you can't like put your finger on it. You can't describe it. We didn't have like a smoking gun. This is bad. But all the red flags were there. It'll ruin your marriage. It'll ruin your business. It'll ruin your family. It'll ruin your health. And just all of these like curses.
Christian
if we
witchcraft?
even...
Wake up and win. Wake up.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Wake Up and Win podcast. We're your host, Blaise.
And Christina.
Good to be with you
we
all.
should say our last
Foray,
name because
Foray.
people say it wrong.
Ferret, and but it's F-O-R-E-T. It's Francais. We are not French. I am French. You are Scotch-Irish. My mom's Scotch-Irish too. My dad's French. Let's go deep into it. Let's go into, like Colossians would say, let's go into endless genealogies. Let's do it. But guys, we're happy to be with you tonight, and we are going to be diving into really just the introductory session of talking about something's not right.
That's right. Yeah, we've been wanting to do this for a little bit, wanting to start a book club, if you will.
Mm-hmm. But you're all invited, and you're all here.
Yes, it's very
Don't worry,
open.
there's no buy-in
It's not
or
an
anything.
exclusive thing. You don't even have to read the book, really. But we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be fun. But yeah, we wanted to kick it off with Something's Not Right. So we're just going to do the
Show 'em the
intro
book.
today.
You got it, yeah.
Just going to do the intro, talk about it, talk about why we chose this book. And then
we're going to go from there.
Then we'll read it.
Talk about each chapter, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But the reason why we're doing this is because that book was really influential for us about a year and a half ago. It's really about spiritual abuse and recognizing patterns of spiritual abuse. And that word is, I had never heard of that word probably 2 years ago, spiritual abuse, or even a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like, wait, what? And then as we started seeing things unfold at our church with some of our friends and our former pastor, we were like, oh, wait a second.
Well, what's crazy is the reason we read the book is it was recommended to us because whenever all the 𝐖𝐀𝐍𝐓 stuff was unfolding. Mm-hmm. So we were covering it, we were talking about it, and we're like, this is weird, what's going on? Mm-hmm. And somebody was like, you should read this book. And so we did. And as we were reading it, we were obviously seeing.
Well, you were reading it.
Okay,
I was
reading it. I was reading it, and I was telling you everything I was reading.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, this makes sense. This is what's happening at 𝐖𝐀𝐍𝐓. But I was also like, this is not just happening at IHOP. This is happening at our church.
Yeah.
So I would read it and I would see things. We were never like, we don't have like an intense spiritual abuse story from our church, but I would see the red flags. I would see all the red flags, and then come to find out there was like 10 years of spiritual abuse allegations there. Thankfully, we never got that close to that happening, but all the red flags were there, and I didn't know what they were. Mm-hmm. So I read this book because it gives you language for the feelings. So when you're sitting there and you hear somebody say something, or you know something's off, that's why I love even the name of the book, Something's Not Right. It's like the perfect title because you have that feeling. You know something's not right, but you can't like put your finger on it. You can't describe it sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But after you read this book, you'll be able to. So. Yeah,
totally. And I think in the initial stages of breaking down everything with 𝐖𝐀𝐍𝐓, and this is why I think in some ways what we do, what other podcasters do out there is important. You know, I had a conversation not too long ago with somebody that I really like and respect, but they just were like, yeah, you don't want to do what you're doing. Basically, in essence, they just like, you don't want to do what you're doing. This isn't it's not a good idea for your ministry. You don't want to be known like this. And I was thinking, first and foremost, I don't really think about too often about like, how am I known? I just don't really think about that. I just want to be what I'm going to be and be faithful to what feel called to do. But also I think there's this perception that we just kind of like watch the news, the Christian news, and go, oh, that guy fell, let's talk about him. Oh, that guy fell, let's talk about him. It's like, no, that's not really what's happening. And that's definitely not what happened with 𝐖𝐀𝐍𝐓. It was one of those things that a lot of what we do, not every time, but a lot of what we do is help unfold the story as it's breaking and uncover the cover-up culture that's going on at the moment.
Right.
Like with IHOP, I think without the online voices that were taking shots the whole time of like at the process, I don't know if they would have had a process. I don't know if Mike would have had to step down because there was so much silencing that he had been doing for years. So, so I think I'm saying all that to say, like, as we watch these things unfold, we watched it unfold. Also, I think we watched it unfold with Mike Brown, Dr. Michael Brown and his whole thing. We were watching that unfold and reporting on it as it was happening with the whistleblowers. So I guess I'm saying that to say, like, while we were watching that unfold with Mike Bickle and reporting on it, we would get these moments where it was like, okay, he said this, he groomed the entire audience in this way, and he said this to the audience, or, hey guys, the accuser of the brethren, that whole thing. And so I feel like this book, you started to say, you'd be like, wait, I'm reading this, we're seeing Mike do this, but hey, I think our pastor does this too, right?
Which, again, I didn't know about the intense stuff that had happened with our friends and him, but there was definitely the Sundays of just preaching of like, don't slander, don't gossip, touch not the Lord's anointed. A lot of the God told me, messages, God told me, which ended up being just like a power move. All of those things I was noticing and feeling not good about. And so we were ready. We didn't have like a smoking gun of like, this is bad, but all the red flags were there. So as soon as one of our friends told us what had happened to them, I believed it immediately. And it wasn't hard for me to be like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Whereas if it had happened maybe a year earlier, we may have been like, actually, it did happen. It did happen a few months earlier. And we definitely were like, had those conversations of like, should we be listening to this?
What do you mean?
It was a different friend.
Oh, yeah.
I'm saying whenever Armando first told us, which we've talked about this before, and we did a whole podcast with Armando and Shayla and them telling their story. But whenever he first told us, and he didn't even say anything. He didn't even say anything inappropriate or he was so careful to be honoring also, but he gave a hint that something weird went down. And we were like, we can't
we felt like we
entertain this
couldn't even listen to
conversation.
it. We felt like it was because there was so much gaslighting from the stage.
We thought it would be disobedient to God for us to listen
Even
to our
listen
friend.
to his story of being what we would call spiritually abused. Like he was basically like there would be a new prophetic word like every couple weeks, changing his direction, and he was a staff member at the church, but he would be kind of the hands and feet of like the pastor's vision. So he'd be, now we're doing this, now we're building this, now we're doing this. And it would always change. And it was really wrecking his life. And even to the point of them saying like, hey, you shouldn't be, God's telling us you need to put down your cameras for a while, which that was his profession, he was a professional like producer. And so they did. And it wasn't the church's cameras. It was literally his cameras. And they were like, yeah, you're supposed to put down your cameras. So there's no like, hey, we're sensing maybe God might be leading us in this area. What do you think? It's just like, this is what the Lord, thus says the Lord type of thing. I mean, it was intense. But yeah, we felt like to listen to his story was gossip and slander.
Because that's what we heard every Sunday.
Yeah.
And I remember one time our pastor actually told us, because obviously he knew there was a little bit of tension between them, even though we didn't know yet.
Between Armando and the pastor. Yeah.
He knew that Armando had stories, and he knew that we were close with Armando and seeing him like once a week because he was actually doing our podcast.
He was filming
for us
at that time.
So he told us.
Quality was way better.
Yeah.
Content has gotten better, but quality back then.
But our pastor, one thing he did say to us, it was so like cryptic too, because he didn't just come out and say like, hey, don't talk to Armando anymore, don't mess with him. It wasn't like that. it was more of just like, yeah, don't make sure that you guys don't, God hates gossip. Make sure that you don't let any gossip enter your household. If it goes through the threshold of your door, it'll ruin your marriage. It'll ruin your business. It'll ruin your family. It'll ruin your health. And just all of these like curses.
Christian witchcraft?
If we even listen to a story from a friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we kind of believed it. We kind of believed it at that moment.
I think so.
Because we really respected him. And
yeah, I think we were just kind of like, okay.
We're like, okay, so let's not let Armando, but we still wanted to be friends with Armando, and we still wanted.
And he was working for us.
Yeah,
at the time.
so we still were going to see him, but we were just going to have to set some real clear boundaries that he wasn't allowed to talk about.
Yeah.
That around us. So that happened first. Then we started reading Something's Not Right. Thankfully, or all in the same time frame. Quickly realized, hey, that was weird.
Yeah.
We were like, that was weird. We should listen to our friend if
and
they
so
have a story.
So we did end up listening to him and hearing his story, and we were like, geez. And then around the same time, I don't know the time frame, but then Micah called us and was like, hey, we're leaving the church. If you'd like to know the reasons why, I'll tell you.
Yeah, even that he wasn't going to just tell us.
Yeah.
He was like, if you ask me, I will tell you.
Yeah.
And we're like, tell us.
And then it all unfolded. We were like, oh my gosh. And so much of the tactics were, you got the kingpin at the top that has his elders and staff members, and everything is about his spiritual authority, the covering theology, don't buck against the Lord's anointed, but if you're safe under cover, then you're good, and a lot of that stuff was like, and then of course you add in unchecked, untested, and the lack of ability to judge the prophetic. So I don't think it's the prophetic in and of itself, because there's a pure prophetic, and I mean, it exists in the Bible. You at least see it in the New Testament. You at least see it like in New Testament letters. I'm not saying you see it all the time in the body of Christ right now, but you at least see it in Scripture. But there's also an untested and unjudged and unsanctified prophetic that literally is one of the most powerful weapons to spiritually abuse people. I mean, in our history, like from what I see, is you get somebody believing that a guy can hear from God, and then you put the covering theology on top of it that you can't go against them, and then not only can they hear from God, but also there's the covering theology. Then you add in that you can't judge it.
Yeah.
So you're just like, you're screwed. I mean, there's nowhere to go from there. So, and then when you leave the church, you're judged. If you leave, then people are speaking, well, yeah, don't leave like so-and-so did, and they got sick when they left, or like just crazy stuff. So, I mean, it was a recipe for weirdness.
Yeah.
So yeah, we bounced out right when we heard those stories. We were like, okay, this is bad. Let's get out of here. But yeah, then I think I read the book after you did. I ended up reading through it.
We got it like on Audible after that. And listened to it when we were in Montana.
Because you were like, you really need to read this. So I did read it, and it was very, very impactful. It made so much sense. Oh, I was going to say, some of the greatest strategies that I would see from this book and see happening was that kind of tendency to isolate people and, break them apart from their own, like the people that they trust, which we saw that in the marriages at our church, where they would kind of come between marriages, and they would tell people, don't share this with your wife. God's working on you in this area or something. It's like, what? And then breaking down your own intuition and making you try to trust the leader versus
more
your
than
own
yourself.
Intuition, which God's given us that inner peace, to go by. And a lot of times in this type of environment, you literally override that inner peace to trust the leader, and ends up in disaster. But yeah, I think this is gonna be a great.
Yeah,
book.
I
for us
think
to
so
go through.
too. I think it'll be good for people who have left a toxic church, or if you are in the middle, like right now, if you're kind of confused, wondering if you are a part of maybe like a spiritually abusive environment, this will help clear that up for you. But also somebody that I think would benefit from this is leaders.
I thought you were going to say somebody's name.
is you specifically this person. No.
John Mark Baker. Kidding.
No, I was going to say leaders, because I do believe that not everyone who spiritually abuses somebody is like this evil narcissist all the time. Sometimes, a lot of times, I think for especially the like middle management leaders or middle level leaders, it's like a learned behavior, or you
Makes so
learn
much
from
sense.
the pastor who might be, you know, a narcissist and be spiritually manipulating people. You learn how to be a leader from them. So you start to imitate the same behaviors that they have, even if you're not, that's not your natural.
It's not your personality.
Yeah, it's not what you would normally do, but you start doing things that aren't you. And so I think this is a good book to recognize that, hopefully ahead of time, so you don't fall into that trap.
Yeah.
But even if you have done it, to see it and be like,
Go
oh my
fix it.
gosh, I've got to
You can go fix it right away.
Yeah.
And one of the first things you do is you take responsibility and you apologize. You know, if you did something to somebody out of a mindset of duplicating the leader that's above you, you go and apologize. You go make it right. Hey, when I did this, that wasn't me, but that's not what I meant. That's not who I meant to be, but I did that and I shouldn't have done that. And here's why I think I did it. And it was, you know, if you want to get into my educational mind here, this is what's happened, you know, over time. Let me educate you on this so that if you won't end up doing this too, you know.
True, yeah.
But
yeah, like everybody's responsible for their own behaviors.
Right.
So as a leader, if you did spiritually abuse somebody, you have to take responsibility for it. But I do think it's okay to recognize, oh, this is how I was taught to lead by the
Right.
most godly person I know, or I thought.
right. And spiritual abuse, it affects people's relationships. It affects people's psychological state. It affects people's emotional state. It affects people's finances. Oftentimes it affects their career. I mean, it's like, cause it sounds like we're not talking about church hurt. We're not talking about like, man, I'm a good worship leader. Y'all didn't put me as the worship leader, or, you know, I'm a good preacher. You didn't let me preach like at least a couple times a year, or it's not that, or it's like, I didn't get this leader. It's not that kind of stuff. It's a lot of psychological manipulation, and it doesn't just have to be in prophetic environments, although that can be one of the easiest places to do it. It can be in any, like, I mean, you can be in heavy Bible-based, word-based, theological, you know, type of churches that lean heavy on the word, heavy on the scripture, but then you add in the top guy knows the most. He's the best at arguing Calvinism out of everybody, and he has all the answers, and he's the best at scripture, and like people will lean in and do what he says because his interpretation is the most spiritual. So it can happen in any of these types of environments, but I just want to clarify, you know, it's not like, it's interesting because it's not like it's just church hurt people. This is stuff that really affects people's livelihoods a lot of times, their finances, their giving patterns, which affects their finances. The jobs they take or don't take oftentimes can come down to things where people are leading them and telling them to do certain things. And you'd be like, well, why don't they just think for themselves? And it's like, you've never been in a cult-like environment, or an environment that slowly but surely started to shape your thinking into where they were even using Bible verses, and sometimes in right context, but wrong application, to end up messing with your life. So it's not as simple as, well, if you just read the Bible, you wouldn't have done that. But there are steps that are taken to break someone down that are a sincere and a genuine person that loves the Lord, loves the word, and ends up being in shipwreck because they got spiritually abused and manipulated. So it's not, I just think sometimes I see it's almost like I can hear people's like thought processes on this, because when I would hear that word spiritually abused, I'd be like, well, couldn't they just this? Couldn't they this? And it's like, yes, you always have some type of a will but what happens is when it gets broken down over time and chipped away, it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And then people oftentimes in counseling sessions, pastors in counseling sessions will find all of your weaknesses, and then you become a blackmail victim. Any other thoughts on this before we...
I thought I would read the back of it.
Yeah, do it.
Let me read the back of it. Okay, it says, using the term abuse may seem extreme, a label for what happens to other people, not you. Yet when you think about a certain relationship or institution, you just can't shake the feeling that something's not right. Something's not right. In this debut book, researcher and advocate Wade Mullen introduces us to the strategies individuals and organizations employ to gain power and cover up their wrongdoings. Abusers of all kinds use these patterns to control and coerce, to keep their victims silent. If we can learn to decode these methods, if we can learn the language of abuse, we can begin to stop the cycle of destruction in our lives. Something's Not Right will help you identify and describe tactics that were previously unidentifiable and indescribable, giving you the language and courage you need to move toward freedom and create a safer future for yourself and others. So that's the back of the book. That's what it's about. Something's Not Right. You can get it if you want to read along with us. We're going to read the first chapter. We'll do it every Thursday. So like now we'll read the first chapter, talk about that one next Thursday. And if you guys, while you're reading it, have like a story of, I do want it to be like interactive. So if you have a story or a question,
send us an email.
Yeah,
WakeUpandWinP, WakeUpandWinP@gmail.com, and in the subject line, put Something's Not Right, and then and we'll know that's like you're sending us a story, or something that stuck out to you, or something that was like a game changer for you, whatever. That way we can read it whenever we do. That's a great idea. Yeah, I think it'll be cool. For sure. Now, speaking of books, how many guys out there are book writers? Look, this is me, like youth pastor mode. How many guys out there are book writers? Raise your hand. Click the like button. Subscribe if you're a book writer. No, but actually, we just recently connected with Yvonne from Pear Creative, and she's so cool. And her website and what she does, her business is so cool. They've like helped create and design over 4,200 books for Christian and non-Christian authors out there. But I mean, so they've had some Amazon bestsellers, and she doesn't want me to read it. She wants you to read it.
I was waiting for you to let me.
She wants you to read the ad, but yeah, she's recently, her business has sponsored this episode today, and it's just a great fit because what she does, I thought honestly that I've talked to so many of our listeners that are actually authors or are former pastors that are possibly have written a book in the past. Maybe they want to write a book in the future. Maybe you've got a message inside you and you're already started the process. And you're like, how do I put this together and design it, et cetera. So share more about Pear Creative.
Pear Creative is a publishing design company helping authors bring their books to life and share their stories with the world. Yvonne at pearcreative.ca has designed over 4,200 books for self-published authors and dozens of publishers, with many bestsellers to her credit. Whether you're doing it on your own or are a publisher looking for an experienced book designer, Pear Creative delivers bestseller looks at a first-time author price. You'll get a stunning cover, a beautiful interior, a world-class ebook, and they'll even help you get your book up on Amazon. And Yvonne is fast. She's fun. You guys will love Yvonne. She's super fun. She's our group. She's our crew. Yeah. They've been listening for like a year and a half to the podcast, so they're totally plugged into what's happening in this whole world. And so if you're looking for somebody to work with that gets it, that gets you, she's definitely the person. For sure. From manuscript to market, she will guide you step by step so the publishing process is easy, fun, and low stress. Check out pearcreative.ca. Bestseller looks at a first-time author price. Make sure you let Yvonne know that you were sent to her website by Wake Up and Win, by Christina specifically. And if you want a greater discount, tell her you were sent by Blaise, and you'll probably get even the better discount. No, she already has people reaching out to her, and they said, Christina sent me. It's true, they did. So I kind of like that. It's kind of rude, maybe actually. Just say Christina. I don't know. It's kind of rude, but I'm not going to say that that's like spiritual abuse necessarily, but it's like...
Yeah, I don't know. It's something. It's something. But listen, guys, grab up the book, Something's Not Right. Get it on Audible or Amazon, however you want to get it, and read along with us. I really think this is going to help you guys, bless you guys a lot, like it's blessed us. And honestly, I'm looking forward to going through it again, because there's always things that just pop out that are new. So, and if you find yourself in the middle of a situation, that's one thing that I really love when this happens. I mean, I hate that it happens at all, but I love comments from people that are like, yeah, I came across your podcast while I was going through something like this at a church that was like this, and I realized it because you guys just were willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
And like, that is probably the number one reason why I would tell people, you've got to tell your story. You've got to be willing to talk, and opening your mouth about these types of stories is not gossip. It's not slander. It's just truth telling. And what's that quote that you told me years ago? I don't know if I agree with her theology or anything.
Oh, Anne Lamott. No, if people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better.
Yeah. So anyway.
Quote I live by.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to tell your story and tell it like it is. And sometimes that is what opens the door for other truth tellers and whistleblowers. And then suddenly, before you know it, a system or a dangerous system or a dangerous person is exposed and stopped from hurting other people, because you stopped listening to the do not touch the Lord's anointed, or don't gossip, don't slander, all that stuff. So anyway, all right, guys, going to be fun. Dive in, get that book, and make sure you subscribe, like, all the things, and we'll be back.
See you next week.
Next week. Peace.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up.